When I first started this channel, in my mind, we were going to spend an equal amount of time talking about D&D and board games. And then D&D took over my life, and I've played like 3 of these board games behind me in the last 2 years. I think that happens to a lot of us. It's kind of hard sometimes to go back to the rigid structure of a board game once you see what games like D&D have to offer. Now, when I do play board games, my tastes tend toward co-op games and so-called multiplayer solitaire games, where you're trying to build up your own point-generating engine more efficiently than the other players do. Some of my favorite games include Roll for the Galaxy and Race for the Galaxy, Alchemists, Terraforming Mars, La Granja, and Orleans. I don't really like games that involve direct conflict, so this game here is probably not my cup of tea. Onslaught is a skirmish game, and thank you to WizKids for sending it to me to review. You choose a team, your opponent chooses a team, there's some customization, you choose a scenario, and then you fight. As you fight, your heroes can die, they can also gain experience and new abilities. They might obtain loot that can shift the tide of the battle. They might find monsters that they can sick on their opponents. You'll be picking a faction, and each faction has characters that fill certain roles, like ranged attacker or tank, or vanguard as they call it in this game. Or there's a healer or a melee fighter. Things you're probably used to from MMOs. You won't be bringing the entire faction with you on each mission. You'll need to pick and choose for each individual scenario. And this game isn't just player faction against player faction. There are also monsters. This set has kobolds, a troll, an Ettin, and a young black dragon. There are objectives and scenarios, so each session will be a little bit different. Honestly, on paper, it's not really my thing, but as I kind of looked through the various characters and I saw how they could work together and support each other, I saw those synergies, I kind of felt that itch in the back of my head saying, maybe this would be fun, especially when you add in some of the expansions to make building your team a little bit more strategic. I know a lot of people enjoy skirmish games. I mean, HeroClix from WizKids is absolutely enormous. But there's something here that we're gonna have to talk about. This game uses minis that we can also use in our D&D and other games. And as you can see, those expansions, or as you will see soon, those expansions have more minis. And at least to me, some of the minis are really good. They're highly desirable, they're really interesting, and I believe they are all exclusive to this game. And they aren't just reusing minis from the booster sets the way they sometimes do. So in this video, I'm gonna go over the basics of this game so you can get a sense of whether it might be something that you'd enjoy. And then we're gonna go over all those minis. Now the full rules are available for free online, and I'll link them for you in the doohickey down below. And of course, again, thank you to WizKids for sending this and all the expansions for us to review. And once our main Onslaught video here is out, I'm going to hit all those little expansion sets because I am gonna need to show you all those minis. And you just need to see them. And if you only care about the minis and you don't care about this game at all, remember that we have that segmented timeline down below me, so you can just jump right to the minis if you want to. So all that said, let me fix up my little Tom Vassal hat, and let's take a look at Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught. Before we jump in, we're going to do something a little bit different, starting today with our sponsor, Hit Point Press. With their animated spell cards, they offer some special ones called Spellcraft cards that have unique animations on the front, but a blank back for you to write your own spells. Well, we're going to take this deck, Animated Spellcraft Cards Volume 1, and make our own spells for the cards inside. We're going to publish these spells over on our website. You can download them for free, and they'll be formatted so that you can print them, cut them out, and slide them into the card sleeve along with your Spellcraft cards to use at your own table. We are starting with this beauty right here. We're calling this one Catchy Tune. When you cast this School of Enchantment Earworm, it'll get into the heads of anyone nearby who can hear it, and it'll disrupt any concentration spells that they might try to cast. Pick up your Spellcraft deck and all the other animated cards over at animatedspells.com, and get your free spells at gallantgoblin.com. All those links again are right in the doohickey down below. Onslaught was designed by Alex Davey, Travis Severance, and Nicholas Yu. Alex Davey previously worked on the Star Wars X-Wing miniatures game and Star Wars Legion, which was another mini-based skirmish game. If you're familiar with D&D, the terminology and the basic setup is going to be very familiar to you. You have initiative, which is done with cards. Each character has a standard, a bonus, and a move action, which work pretty similarly to D&D. There are even free actions as well. I will admit that every time I see those 5e action types, I can't help but think that the Pathfinder 3-action economy is just a lot better, but that's a topic for another day. This set comes with 12 characters from the Harpers and the Zhentarim factions, several monsters, a game board map, tokens, dice, and a bunch of cards. Characters get a melee attack, which uses a standard action as denoted by the S there. They also get a ranged attack as well. You will be rolling dice for your attacks, always rolling with advantage for some reason, and there are critical effects on a 20, and a 1 is always a miss. There's a scroll wheel on the side to track your health, and as your health changes, it can also change your armor class, which is how hard you are to hit, and your speed. Each character also has special cooldown abilities that they can't necessarily use every turn, and there's a helpful little dial to help you keep track of when you can use them. And each player also has a reaction that they can use in response to a certain trigger, also with a cooldown wheel. Each character has certain rules for leveling up, after which they'll gain a new ability as denoted on some included cards. Finally, there's an icon at the top corner to denote the role that a character plays on the team, this one being a healer. One slight criticism of the design here is that they choose to use a silhouette to represent the character on the card, but this makes it a bit more cumbersome to remember which card is connected to which mini when you're controlling 5 different characters in a session. I would have preferred just to have regular character art that is full color. So, combat sessions go rather like you'd expect. Each character and monster has an initiative card. You go back and forth using your standard bonus and move actions. You attack, you loot chests, you equip items, you gain XP and you level up. You gain new character-specific abilities. You can gain and dish out some conditions as well, and you try to complete the scenario objectives. The base set comes with this double-sided map and a book of 10 scenarios. Let's start with the board. It's board game quality, which is nicer than most of the maps we get as D&D players. It measures 26 by 20 inches, so pretty large. You can definitely use it in your regular D&D and Pathfinder games. For those of us who want to use it in both Onslaught and our D&D games, the subtle grid is nice, as is the lack of a ton of Onslaught-specific icons, which are usually scattered all over the place in skirmish games. The only downside of that is that you will have to consult the book for the important scenario-specific spots on the map, like blocking terrain, starting areas, respawn areas, loot locations, etc. The maps are pretty generic for better or worse, but they are quite interesting from a gameplay perspective, as they do have quite a lot of cover and changes in elevation, so your battles in Onslaught and your D&D games could be quite interesting. The set comes with not only minis, but tokens that you'll use for various different scenarios. Speaking of which, here is a look at a typical scenario. This one is called the Ettin. The goal of this scenario is to defeat the Ettin sitting in the center of the map. You get points by dealing damage to it, by damaging his Kobold sentries, and by controlling the arcane circles at the top and bottom of the map. So you may want to send your ranged fighters out to control the circle while your melee fighters fight the Ettin. So if your opponent has a similar strategy, you might send your melee fighters in to knock out the opponent's ranged fighters on the circle, so they'll be at a disadvantage for the rest of the battle, leaving you to control both points while damaging the Ettin from afar. And then there is the Mimic that might come into play as well, and the Ettin is matching up fools in the meantime. Each scenario has different special rules and objectives, hopefully keeping things interesting. Okay, so let's get to the minis, as I know that's what most of you are here for. The set comes with 2 player factions and then some monsters. We're going to start off with the Harpers. There are 6 members of each faction, and you'll generally select 5 for each scenario. As we go through each one, I'll share with you a bit of information from their designer diaries. We'll start with Chloe Amaznodel. All the characters have names, but as far as I can tell, they are all original creations for the Onslaught game. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Harpers are a semi-secretive organization of spies, bards, casters, and lore masters, tasked with maintaining the balance between nature and civilization, and defending the innocent and the defenseless against evil. Chloe is the healer and the bard of the group, with the ability to cast Healing Word and give her allies inspiration. The 2 cards you see at the top here are her level up cards. You can choose one when she levels up during a scenario. Typically, you'll level up each character once in a given scenario. The little icon with the X in the circle indicates that both of these cards are one-use abilities, and I do absolutely adore her detailed mini. Next up is Lightning Dancer, a Tabaxi fighter with a lot of movement abilities. He is the vanguard, or the tank of the faction. He can cross the battlefield quickly, move his opponents into and out of important locations, and he synergizes well with Chloe and Sedona, who we'll talk about shortly, as they'll help him pull off his critical abilities more often. And we have a criminal lack of Tabaxi minis, so this one is pretty great. This is Drakmal Rockbiter, a hard-hitting Goliath barbarian with the Rage ability. She is the definition of a glass cannon, though, with the lowest hit points of all the Harpers. Again, she does benefit greatly from the support of Chloe and Sedona. So, maybe it's time we take a closer look at this mysterious Sedona. Sedona Sparklebang, great name, is a gnome wizard and serves what's called the hybrid role in the group. She doesn't have much firepower, but she has a lot of support and control abilities. She can also move foes around, cause them to attack their own allies, and she can aid her allies' attacks as well. And for a small gnome mini, she's painted up pretty nicely. Next up is the Harper's Tactician, Abellio Mac Gabhan, the Furbold Druid, and arguably the best Furbolg mini that we've had from WizKids yet. As a tactician, he can help control the battlefield. He can wild shape into a wolf to move about more quickly to an important part of the map, and then he can drop a spike growth there to block passage. Finally, we have Grabbleshanks, the Goblin Ranger who specializes in ranged attacks with his short bow. He can focus fire with his mark ability, he can sometimes shoot twice with his double shot ability, and he can simply just shoot from the longest range of anyone in the core set. And again, we don't have a lot of heroic D&D Goblin minis quite like this one. Plus, his name is Grabbleshanks. Here you can see the full Harper set together, quite the diverse little group. There's not too much indicating that they all go together other than the general kind of pastel coloring of each of them, but they're definitely a handsome set of minis. And also each faction gets their own dice set, and here is the one for the Harpers. Next up, we have the Zhentarim, subtle manipulators, power brokers, and mercenary group. Not afraid to bend the rules and break bones when needed. Starting with the Drow rogue, Lassal du Arathmier. The Zhentarim focus on movement and spike damage. She is the melee damage dealer in the set with sneak attack, extra movement with her cunning action, and the ability to stealth. She's very likely the finisher of your group. Lassal does need to have someone else in melee range with an enemy to use her sneak attack ability, and that person is likely to be Barashiel, the paladin vanguard of the group, who can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody. This hobgoblin has the highest AC in the core set, and he can also spike some damage and slow his foes with his smite ability. Ranged attacks come from Rock P. Rotrix, the clanless, or just Roxy to her friends. She is a red dragonborn sorcerer. She is the definition of a blaster with firebolt, burning hands, and fireball ready to go. Anytime the enemy bunches up, Roxy can punish them, but you have to protect her because she's pretty squishy if anyone gets the drop on her. Keep her guarded or behind cover when you can. Next up is Mistral, the Air Genasi trickster cleric healer. First of all, this mini. Is this not an absolutely iconic, heroic, and evocative sculpt? I love it. The minis here are freaking top tier. The Zents deal in spike damage, and Mistral deals in spike healing. She can heal a lot with her Cure Wounds ability, but not so often, so your risk-reward ratio is going to be pretty high with her. She's also tough to take down with her abilities to invoke Duplicity and Pass Without a Trace. Bedlam is the hybrid of the Zents as a Tiefling Hexblade Warlock. She is a hard-hitting blend of melee and range damage, and again, she's a glass cannon, so you're going to want to be bold and take down your foes quickly. But she can strike back at those who dare to attack her with her Hellish Rebuke ability, and she can curse foes and regain health when those foes are slain. And again, I really love her detailed mini. And finally, we have Javika the Flowing Maple, the Monk Tactician. I am pretty certain she's meant to be human, but to me this mini has a little bit of a red tint, especially with those red accents on her outfit, so I think you could probably use her as a female hobgoblin monk, which is pretty dope. Javika has arguably the most movement of any character in the core set, and since her range sling ability is a bonus action, you can use it almost every turn. And here are the Zents all together. The little blue accent motif does bring this group together a little bit more, which I really dig. And I actually love that idea. For my hero groups in my regular D&D games, I think I'm gonna have them pick an accent color to bring them together, even if it's just in our imagination. And here are the Zhentarim Dice as well, not in their designated accent color, unfortunately. But here you can see all the PC minis together from both the Zhentarim and the Harpers, and that Furbolg is pretty impressive. Now, since this is a player versus environment game, let's take a look at some of those monsters that will be opposing both teams, starting with a small warband of 4 Kobolds. These little guys are unique sculpts that'll fit right in with your actual WizKids Kobold warband. They're certainly more enemy Kobolds than PC Kobold minis. No crazy wizard or bard Kobolds here, unfortunately, but maybe we'll get those one day. As far as minion goes, you also get these 2 pretty good-looking Gnolls. The Gnolls may actually be my favorite monster minis in the set. I really dig that broken shield that one of them is holding here. And next up we have 3 boss level monsters, starting with the Troll. This particular mini isn't amazing, but I feel like it's been a while since we've had a regular Troll mini. They do each get their own character card with dials and abilities. The cards are double-sided, so for the Troll you'll also have a less powerful but more sarcastic young Troll. Of course, either Troll is able to regenerate health. Next up is a pretty decent looking Ettin. These brutes go into a rage when they suffered a certain amount of damage. They'll no longer be able to hurl rocks at you, but they'll be much more deadly as they slam you with their fists. Several characters get special abilities once they've been wounded to a certain point. It's called having the bloodied condition. When you're using the scroll wheel on their card, you'll see the background turn red at some point, indicating that they're bloodied. Their AC and movement speeds are likely to change if nothing else. And finally, we have a young black dragon as the big boss. It comes on a huge size base with a large size circle, as you're probably used to by now. The wings are detachable, and you will need to remove them if you want to store the dragon in the box. The front of the card gives you abilities when you're grounded, and the opposite side gives you flying abilities. As for the mini, I like the detail on the head, but the body looks almost unpainted. It probably could have used some more dry brushing and a wash, if nothing else. And here you can see all the minis in the set all together. Let me just say, the PC minis are where it's at. No one is going to buy this set for the Troll and the Ettin and the Young Black Dragon, but those 12 PC minis are pretty good, and some of the expansion minis are even better. With that matching accent color, if you're looking to add a rival adventuring party to your adventures, but here you go. And a group of Zhentarim mercenaries can work on almost any campaign. The Harpers could be an allied group for your regular D&D campaign when the PCs need help with some particular assignment. You can even have a few sessions where the players control the Harper faction instead of their own characters to run a side mission. And that's a great way to have a session when not every player can make it for your regular campaign. Finally, here's a look at some of the item cards that you might pick up along the way. Some of the scenarios have special rules about bringing certain loot cards from previous missions into the next one, so that becomes another level of strategy when you're building up your team. Hopefully you've got a good sense of the game now so you'll know whether this is something for you. I think it's a good time, but I still probably wouldn't choose to play this over a game of regular D&D. I think the general consensus around the game in the community is that it is a solid design, if not particularly revolutionary. If you're a fan of skirmish games and D&D, you should enjoy this one. It has a 7.7 rating over on Board Game Geek, which is pretty good. Now, as you might have guessed, the core set isn't cheap. The MSRP is about $140, though I am seeing it on Amazon right now for around $112, and I will have those links down below. They have announced a version coming out later this year that includes everything but the 4 dice and the minis, and that'll run you about $80 MSRP. Now, I have to imagine, if you were watching me right now, you were probably here for those minis. Core sets like this tend to go on sale relatively often, so they want people to buy into it so they later go ahead and buy the expansion. So do set yourself up some price alerts if you'd like to see what's in this set, but you want to, maybe the price is a little bit out of your budget right now. Especially for Black Friday and things like that, you might see this a little bit cheaper. So let me know what you think about it in the comment section down below. And I'm going to be knocking out those expansion reviews over the next couple of weeks here too, so be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those. I think you are going to want to see those minis. And also, here's another little tip for you. Games like this tend to have somewhat limited lifespans. After a few years, the expansions stop and they move on to something else. You may be able to pick up some of these expansion sets and this core set relatively cheaply when that eventually does happen. But because the minis are so compatible with the regular D&D sets, they may hold their value a little bit better too. We're just gonna have to wait and see. They may end up reprinting just the minis in a few years as another way of getting them, but I have no way of knowing that for now. So, you know, act according to your budget and what you want. One thing I can tell you is that you should get yourself some animated spell cards from Hit Point Press, because those are something that you can use in every D&D game you play. And don't forget to get your free spell over at gallantgoblin.com. And if you want a little customizable kobold companion to keep you company while you play, you can adopt one of your very own at koboldplush.com or heroplush.com. If you wouldn't mind hitting that little thumbs up button down below me too, that helps new people find us, which helps us grow the channel. And for all the latest, you can join us on social media at any of these sites over here. For now though, stay safe, have fun, love each other, and I will see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.